Hey everybody, how's it going? Guys, my name is Miles Witt, and this is the Photographic Collective podcast. And I am so grateful that you stumbled into this episode in this season right now. It's really important to me that you're here, and this is going to be a really special episode. Actually, if you've listened to any of the episodes in the past, you probably can already hear that I'm trying to approach this one like, I don't know, maybe already with a little bit more intentionality than I have. The reason for that is because I'm sitting today with a really close friend of mine, somebody that has completely informed the way that I work, but also is just a big part of my life. And I'm really excited to dig into her process and her story, to be able to kind of share with all of you guys what makes it so special when you can connect your heart to your art. That rhymed, by the way, Alison. Did you catch that?
I totally did.
Okay, so first things first, guys. I always say this at the beginning of every episode. The purpose of this podcast is really simple. There's sort of three things we want to get across. First, we want to empower you to just make more intentional choices with your business, with your art, with your relationships. Second, we want to engage those choices in your clients and up-level your client experience and teach you and train you and expose you to people that are serving and loving and doing it in a really successful way. And then finally, we want to bring you in to a community of people that are purpose-driven and positive, that are focused on creating a little corner of the industry that actually has some really, really beautiful value to it. And so that leads me perfectly into a segue where I get to introduce, I already hinted at it, but one of my close friends in this industry, Alison Conklin, is with us today. And she's sitting at her adorable little home with the cutest, if you're not on YouTube, you should click over, with the cutest wallpaper I've ever seen behind her. Hey, you.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's so good to see you, Miles.
It is, honestly, this is kind of refreshing. I feel like we should probably do this more often than just when I'm recording it. That sounded way creepier than... Okay, we digress already.
Off the rails when it's only 2 minutes in.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this episode is horrible. Hey. Okay. So I want to dig into a whole lot with you, and I've got like a whole list of kind of angles that I want to come at, which shouldn't intimidate because I already kind of gave you the backstory. But do us a favor first. If for some reason people that are listening don't know who you are and where you are and what you shoot, can you just give us like a high level on that?
Sure. So my name is Alison Conklin. I am outside of the Philadelphia area. I have been photographing weddings for 23 years, which is madness, but it's true.
So cool.
Yeah.
It's so special. It really is. It may make you feel like you've been around for a while, but that's really special.
You know what's crazy is one of the very first weddings I ever shot, the bride just reached out to me. So we're talking like she's been married for over 2 decades because her daughter is getting married and she wants me to shoot it.
That's special. That is so, what a cool story. Like, what a legacy that you have in their lives, though. Like, that's really powerful.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I feel really honored to be part of it. Be part of anyone's life like this.
I bet your pricing has changed a little bit. I'm just sorry. Anyway,
maybe just a little. I think I was shooting film. I was shooting because that's how old I am. I was shooting film on like my Canon, whatever. I don't even remember anymore. But that's what I was doing, and I was developing it in my dark room.
So
because
cool.
I didn't even think about messing it up.
Yeah, those of you guys that are listening right now, Alison predates hipsters.
She's that old. It's true.
Yeah. Okay, so you've been doing this for let's call it 20 years. Let's just round down for fun. And you've seen this industry shift and change a lot over the course of the last 2 decades. What on earth 20 years ago, before it was popular to be a wedding photographer, right? Before you could throw a rock and hit 6 wedding photographers and 4 labradoodles. Mm-hmm. What got you into this?
So I fell in love with photography. My parents were hobbyist photographers, meaning they were both chemists, but as chemists do, they would bring home the chemicals and they would develop all of their films. So this is back in the day of, film and all of those things. They had slides too. They obviously didn't develop that, but they would develop all their black and white pictures in their bathrooms of their tiny little apartments as like college students and then, young newlyweds. And so I kind of grew up with, I'm an only child, so I grew up with a camera in my face just all the time because that's just what you do as a parent who likes getting pictures. But when it all came to, when I all started to actually notice it was when my mom died. She died suddenly one day when I was 14. And this is obviously before social media, before, walls of, memories of pictures that you would put online. And so my dad handed me a box of like an old tattered box filled with contact sheets and like prints that they had made and negatives and all of the things, and was like, can you make a wall for your mom's memorial service? And I am Sicilian. My mom is 100% Sicilian. So all of the loud Italian family was at my house. And so I found this little like corner that was quiet and like just started digging through. And so what I fell in love with, because this is the 90s, so like there was a lot of Olin Mills, a lot of Sears portrait, right? Like that was definitely like a thing. But what I fell in love with were all of these like outtakes, right? Considered outtakes from my mom laughing and her eyes closed, or like, like mid-sentence, or, or a picture she has no idea is being taken. Because it really gave me a sense of who she was. Because at 14, we were talking about this before we started about kids being teenagers and sort of like winter is coming. If you have teenagers or you're going to be on the brink of raising a teenager, then you know what I'm talking about. But, and so there was just this like magic where I was sitting on the floor in this like little corner, just like looking at all these photos and being like, I totally understand what I have. Right. Cause like we kind of go through our lives where we just take everything for granted. Right. Like you just don't even think about, especially at 14, but you just don't think about something changing in your life that can't be changed back. Right. Like if you think about something as silly and arbitrary as like your dishwasher breaking, and then like suddenly you have to clean all those dishes, and like it's such a pain because you like you didn't realize how much you loved your dishwasher, right? Like this is like a terrible thing, but just think about that, right? Or think about your hand, like think about losing anything that you just consider is gonna always be there, right? And so at 14 I realized, okay, yeah, that's not the case. But suddenly I have this like beaten up cardboard box full of all of the memories that can give me some sort of insight to my mom, some sort of insight to how my parents were together. And I always say, and how she saw me, right? Because like there were so many photos of me that she had taken. So I kind of just fell in love with photography. I was also super annoying. My dad was suddenly a single father of a teenage daughter with probably no idea. My dad's like really intelligent, has a doctorate in chemistry. I always say like really, really smart, but like social skill is maybe a little off. Like a crazy scientist type was my dad. So suddenly this man has a 14-year-old. And I couldn't let the photography thing go. And I just kept talking about it. And he finally was like, I'll build you a darkroom. So it was funny because like we would spend days in the darkroom. I had like a little like boom box I would put the radio on, or like whatever little mixtape I had made. And he would teach me how to develop film, how to make prints, and we would just go through it. And it was almost like in the beginning, we were using negatives that my parents had taken. So like watching my mom's like beautiful almond shaped eyes come up and like the chemicals was like really, really healing. And so I had this father who couldn't really speak about emotion or talk about the loss that was happening or like how we were feeling. We were able to connect on this level, if that makes sense. Like he could never sit me down and say, Alison, how are you feeling? Like, I'm really sorry I lost my wife. You lost your mom. Let's like talk about it. That was like off the table and not going to happen. But we could connect on this level. And I think that really worked to be quite powerful for the healing process of grief. Not that grief ever goes away, but just for like those immediate like first couple of years. So that's how it kind of started. And then I had my camera everywhere. So I would take it because I could just like, I was my best 1 hour photo. I could just like shoot a roll of film, run down in my basement, and develop it. So I was shooting in yearbook and all that stuff and doing like my senior portraits for my friends. And then when I was 18, someone asked me to shoot their wedding. And that's how this started 23 years ago.
Gosh, that's okay. Wow. I mean, guys, it takes a lot to get me at a loss for words, and I've heard this story about a dozen times. I should probably back up far enough to say, sort of the way, I guess, maybe the reason that Alison and I connected the very first time was me hearing that story. Fujifilm did this really special film video about that story and about what that process has meant to you. But I've always wanted to know more. Like, I've always wanted to kind of dive deeper, because that moment for you where you were able to suddenly use an image to process grief and to really connect with your dad in a special way, and probably support him and help him process his grief. It's informed your work in a really remarkable way. So being this sort of like emotionally forward, how does that spill over into your wedding work?
I mean, I think that's what I'm going for. Like, if an image isn't going to, I mean, as you said before, like, I've been doing this for 2 decades. So suddenly I've seen all of the trends. Remember when we used to like cross-process everything? There was like blue and all the, you know what I mean? Like, so I've gone through all the iterations of like what's been popular. And there's definitely some very embarrassing work that I've done over the course of 23 years. But the majority of everything has always been, does that image make me feel something? Will that image make them feel something or remind them of a moment? And if it doesn't, then it's worthless, really. Because, like, you know, I've been watching, and usually what happens is the posts of the beautiful portraits that you take on a wedding day is what everyone thinks goes first. Like, everybody loves those photos, and that's what gets shared first. And then suddenly, as time changes and as things become different, it always becomes about the people who were there, or the moment you can remember laughing with your grandma, or, you know, getting ready with your dad. We just did this charity shoot here, and a lot of my old clients came to it, and one of them had lost his dad pretty soon after the wedding, and he like came over and thanked myself and Jeff for taking all these beautiful pictures of like just the two of them together hanging out. And, you know, you're just like, that's why I do it. I've never like wanted anything else from it except to give people that same gift I had as a 14-year-old sitting in the corner and being like, I don't know how I would have gotten through any of this if I didn't have these pictures of my mom, right? Because like, we're talking, I'm 41 now, so it's been a really long time since I've seen her face. And if I didn't have the pictures, right?
Yeah.
Getting emotional, but like, it's really important. And like, it's just funny because like, again, with that charity shoot, so many parents came and they were like, just the kids, take just a picture of the kids. And I was like, not going to happen. I'll take that picture for you, but you're going to jump in. I don't care that you're not dressed or that you're wearing your jacket. No one ever has to see that picture, but someday somebody will, and it'll mean something. Right.
Yep.
Like, that's it.
So one of the things I think is most powerful here is that I've gotten to see you, you know, I know that as your origin story, right? Mm-hmm. And then it informed 2 decades worth of shooting, and your photography is, to say that it's evocative it's just a gross understatement. I mean, the way that you shoot, and we'll get there, but the process through which you shoot is so it's so overtly dedicated to that as a mindset. It's remarkable, and I think we're going to blow some people's minds when we dig into that. But I really do, Alison. Like, you shake your head, but I'm serious when I say that your level of commitment to the emotion, even at the expense, and you guys, this is what I'm talking about, the expense of the quality of the image is it's absolutely remarkable. But you've gone then through this other call it a chapter or maybe iteration of all of this now has evolved again in the last 2 years, right? Because now you've had to see, you're getting to see your dad get older, right? And so you bonded with him initially throughout this whole thing, but now I hope it's okay that we dig into this, but that you've moved him out of his house, and all of the photos and all of the work that had to go into that process, and you've sent a son off to college, and so though he has his mom, he's trying to figure out what you had to figure out, right? Like what the world looks like without mom next door. So I guess where I'm going is, like, in the last year, 2 years, have you doubled down on this feeling of like shooting for people like this then?
Definitely. I mean, like, so you mentioned my dad. I mean, so the confines of COVID had really hidden his dementia. And we sort of, it was all brought to light in the beginning of this year. And I became like very aware that he could not live on his own. So we suddenly had to, go through all those things and get him somewhere safe, get him in a senior living facility, all that stuff. And then what we did was clean out his house. And honestly, it was like, kind of a nightmare. But the only things that we kept were photos, like photos that I thought were lost forever, photos I'd never seen before, right? So like that just like reminded me how important it all is. Sometimes it's like, I don't know about you, but like I can get kind of caught up in the idea that like, okay, so this moment's going to happen at the wedding, and then this is going to happen, and then this big thing, and I got to be ready for this. And you kind of can forget to be present for all those little things that are going to happen in between the big things, right? Does that make sense? Like you're yeah. Okay, I need to prep for ceremony, but like I'm going to forget about the bride walking with her dad, like just getting into church or whatever it is, like all those little things that really tell the story probably more than, the parade down the aisle. But like my dad's losing his memories and sometimes doesn't know like who I am when he talks to me. It's tough. It's just a tough thing. And like to have this like kind of, I don't know, I always say slow burn at the end of one's life. But it's been really fun because when I was cleaning out his house, I would start posting all these like hilarious photos that I would find, like these really embarrassing like 80s haircuts, and he would be like, oh, do you remember when we took this? And like that could bring back his memory. So like I think photography is just so powerful in that it really does kind of remind us of all of those things that we sort of just take for granted.
God, it's transformative. It's the reason why I wanted to have this chat with you now, because we've talked now on this podcast with some brilliant business people, right? People that have really, they've maximized their sales process. And we've talked with people who have such an artistic perspective on how and why they shoot. Guys like Jason Vincent, right? Where he's literally creating his own process. But of everybody that we've spoken to, you are probably the closest to my heart as far as just like your why. And I feel really similar. I use photography as a way for me to explore. I love to watch people. I had a very happy but a really complex childhood, and a lot of questions, and a really kind of complex relationship with my parents. And watching other people with their parents has created a lot of healing for me in that. And so hearing you talk about this, I hope that the people who are listening are taking the opportunity to soak up, one, how vulnerable you really are with this, but then probably the more important element is not just feeling, but then doing. And the fact is that you've turned this into something really special. Okay, so you've had all these like wild experiences. Not to mention, by the way, throughout this process, you've become fairly well known in the photo industry. You've had some really big wins, like some massive successes. I'm clearly I'm chasing your tail on the Fujifilm team, and I want to know then, what is it from your perspective? What is it that has given your photography, the actual work, the notoriety that it has gotten? That's a hard question.
Yeah, that's like you're asking what?
Why do people love your photography? You can
Yeah,
answer this. It's
yeah.
it's it's a it's a fair question. It really is. It's a hard question to be humble through, but I think everybody, if you've made it 20 minutes and haven't soaked up Alison's humility, rewind and start again.
Well, thank you, Miles. I mean, honestly, like I sometimes get lost in the idea that I don't have a style in terms of like, there's like people out there that will only like that seem to have a style, and then I look at my work and it's so emotion based and it's so like just like real moment, like I'm just shooting what's like happening. So I mean, I just hope that like I hope that my work just makes you feel something, right? That's just basically whether it makes you sad or if it makes you happy or if it makes you remember something beautiful in your own life. Like that's what I'm going for. So I would hope that would be the answer. It's really hard for me to answer questions about myself like that. But
I would say I think it totally is the answer. I know, I'm sure you get asked this question a lot. I get asked this question a whole lot. Like, what comes after Instagram? Right? And the younger the person that asks that, the quicker they say TikTok, right? Or something like that. But the answer is that that time in our lives it's on its way out. Those of us that have been on Facebook, I think I had a memory the other day on Facebook that was like 17 years old or something like that. We've been doing social media now for half our lives. Mm-hmm. And most of us have gotten to where it's such an ingrained part of who we are that it's becoming less and less important, and the actual, like the tangible, is becoming more valuable to us. And I think the answer, at least from my perspective, the answer to the question that I asked you is that you've never gotten stuck in the trend of trying to chase clout or likes or follows or whatever. Your photography is loved because it's valuable to the people that are in it.
Thanks.
And that's really special. It makes me want, I'm not kidding when I say this, like it makes me want to be shot by you. I would have loved to have my wedding documented in that way. Okay, so for all the nerds that are listening, though, I hinted at this earlier, so I want to jump through this really quick and then keep moving. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but I hinted at the fact that you have a really interesting process that you shoot. So can you give us like a super quick, like an overarching, like what is that and why have you decided to kind of go that route?
Are you talking about the fact that I don't shoot RAW?
No, I mean, a lot of people don't shoot RAW. I do think it's crazy that you shoot a 100 megapixel medium format camera and shoot it in JPEG. But anyway, no, the fact that you guys, okay, spoiler, I'll just say it. Like Alison, if an image needs to be shot at 10,000 ISO, she's going it. She's just pushing it and she does not care. I've seen you take images now where it's like, man, I would have moved a light, moved a strobe, popped, backlit, all the stuff, and I would have missed that moment. And you just are so present. So how does that work for you?
So honestly, like I take a look and I try to like look at the scene, right? Like take a minute, really try to know my client throughout the process of the whole booking stuff, and just take a second, like, how does she or he want to remember this? What is the emotion what is the feeling that they're trying to evoke just in the process of planning their wedding? Like, how are they planned their day? What is it that they want to remember? And you just try to like, then I'm like looking around at the guests, like, how are they feeling right now? So sometimes I'll sit in a guest chair and I'll shoot from that perspective, right? Because I want them to look back at their photos. I want anyone to look at their photos and feel like, oh, I can feel like what it felt like to be the couple. I can feel like what it felt like to be the parents, what it felt like to be a guest, right? So it's just like those things. And like during toast, like I'm absolutely not trying to use any off-camera lighting because I don't want to stop a moment. Like if the bride has walked over and is talking to one of her grandparents, I'm not going to be like popping a flash and like possibly breaking up the emotional moment that's happening because it's not about me at all, right? And I think that could you get like a more technically perfect photo if I properly light it? Yeah. Is that the important thing at the end of the day? No. Is it still a beautiful photo that's pretty technically correct, but maybe not like perfect? Yeah. I'm not trying to say that like my stuff is super dark or underexposed. So I'm just saying.
No, it's not. That's why I asked the question, because you achieve images
Right.
that are absolutely boggling to me. But you do it in dark ballrooms, and you do it in, to candlelight. And it's really special. It takes a really creative eye. So would you say that just because you do you spend more time getting to know your clients? Do you try to really invest, or is this empathy just sort of like natural for you?
It's a little bit of both. I do try to invest. It doesn't always happen. Some people aren't into that. Like, I'm not going to push anyone to be uncomfortable in any sort of situation. Um, but so I have a hearing loss. I've had a hearing loss since I was a kid. So I have, and like never wanted a hearing aid because back in like the 80s, hearing aids were big, and I tried it for like a week and kids made fun of me and I cried and I broke them and my poor parents had to pay for broken hearing aids. But so because of I wouldn't wear them, I've really gone off of like social cues. So sometimes you'll be in a conversation with me and I won't actually know what you're saying, but I'll laugh because you're laughing, or I'll smile, or like whatever, like because I'm so good at watching and trying to figure out what's happening, because I have 40% of my hearing left.
Wow.
So much of my world is very quiet, and it's based on tiny, tiny body movements of people and facial things. And I think that has served me in a way that has helped me kind of be a good people watcher, which is basically what our job is. And so I don't know. I mean, I just think that like in 20 years, when they're explaining these pictures, to their kids or to whoever, like it's not going to be, oh my word, they totally blew our mind with this amazing, elaborate light setup or this crazy, like out of focus front, that it was just like, no, let it just be a beautiful moment of love between generations that maybe aren't still here, right? Like a picture that would show, like I had a bride just a couple of weeks ago who emailed and said, you took the last photo of my grandparents together. He died right before Thanksgiving. And you're just like, yeah, like that's more important and beautiful than a perfectly choreographed dance of like an image that I like had to work really hard for. Like, let's just be quiet and watch. And like, there's really beautiful moments that are going to kind of just obviously happen and unfold. And so I just think that's the baseline. And I feel like if I go through a wedding day and I haven't felt anything, or I haven't been touched by something, or like it hasn't held a place in my heart, that I haven't done my job right. Like when I talked to somebody the other day on the phone about possibly hiring me, and I was trying to explain photography and kind of going through that whole thing about how important it is, because it's not just right now. It's not just for the 200 likes you're going to get on Instagram. It's, it's going to be for these stories that you're going to tell then to your family, to your friends, right? Because like, unfortunately, like life does not stay the same, right? Things are going to change. Things that you think are a given and will always be there are not always going to be there. And so if you have a room full of people that you love, like, let's just focus on that.
Gosh.
And then she said back to me, and it's funny, I wrote a piece for Fuji Love about it. Like, oh, so you're saying photography is so much bigger than me. It's like, yes. And so I have kind of carried her little words in my heart, because it's like, that's such a good way to put it, because it's so much bigger than the couple on that day. Yes, we want to get awesome photos of the two of you. Yes, we want to make sure that you guys look like you could be in a magazine. Yes, of course. But I guarantee you that's not going to be what you are going to be sharing, posting, telling stories about years down the road.
Whoa. Okay. Something just sort of strikes me as we're chatting, and I committed to this before we started recording. I said I wanted this to feel more like just a conversation between friends, not an interview. It blows my mind to sit back now and kind of think through people that I've interviewed, or friends of mine, or just, people in this industry that I'm connected with, that have found a way to to make their camera the tool, right? It's like an on-ramp for them for building relationships or connections, or sometimes just making money, or sometimes it's solving problems, or whatever it is. I don't know if I've ever talked to somebody before, and I'm serious when I say this, I don't know if I've ever talked to somebody before that is so wholeheartedly convinced that like this is your purpose. And it shines, like it shows so well in the way that you add value to your work without talking about the cost. That's really special. So if I could sum up everything I think so far, and I want to hear you speak to this, because there's going to be a number of photographers that are going to listen to this, and I hope that they hear me. But I think Alison would probably just say like you're enough, like without the gimmicks. Nothing against the ring of light or front bokeh or whatever, like nothing against that stuff, but the camera in your hand and you present as an artist, like that's enough. Mm-hmm. And if you get caught comparing yourself to other photographers that feel like they have something else figured out, or they're more stylistic, or they're more creative, maybe you lose sight of the value of why it's important that you're there in the first place. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I think you said that perfectly. I mean, I'm not trying to impress anybody. I'm only trying to record the beautiful moments that are happening, right? Like, because that's enough. Because at the end of the day, it's just like one of those things, like when you all think about being on your deathbed, right? Like, are you really going to care about that overcomplicated photograph you've taken? No.
Yeah.
No, I don't think you will. I think you're going to be like, can a legacy be just like, she photographed something so beautiful that like a moment that is not ever going to happen again. And now it is. Now it's going to live in my mind, or going to live on someone's wall, or they'll be reminded, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, can that just be enough? And I don't understand why it can't be. And I know that like social media has changed things for photography and wedding photography and all of that stuff. And it's a beautiful tool because we can get inspired and we can, see things and that we would be connected from all over the world. But I don't know. At the end of the day, I think all you're really going to want are photos that like look like you, that somebody who really saw you, right? And your complications and your beautiful and your, flaws that you felt like you had at that moment. Like, let's just celebrate that, because I'm telling you, 2 years down the road, it's going to be different. Maybe it'll be different for more beautiful reasons. Maybe it won't. Like, you don't know. And that's the part. Like, man, I can look back in a photo. I can look back at photos of myself and be like, I can just tell, I can see all the sadness in my face, or I can, oh my gosh, I remember like what I was going through, right? Like these are just like the real parts of life that I think can be so lacking in the idea of social media, where everything needs to be perfect, or, because like life is just way more beautiful than all of that. And so that's what I'm here for. Mm-hmm. That's what I like to do. And I like to find my people who appreciate that.
Yeah. How powerful has it got to feel? And I feel like I share these clients with you, but maybe not quite as extreme. But how powerful, how beautiful has it got to feel to be hired in, and then just somebody say like, hey, just capture our feelings. Like, right. Because I know you do the rest. I mean, of course, I know that you shoot the editorial stuff. I know that you shoot the flat lays and the beautiful tablescapes and all of this stuff. But like, mm-hmm. It's just so powerful. I had a conversation with my oldest son, a couple of weeks ago, and you guys have heard me. Listeners, you haven't, but Alison and sort of our friend group, you guys have heard me sort of say these types of things before. But my oldest son is sort of this wise. Well, honestly, he's a smart ass, but he also is just sort of this like wise kid, like this sort of like old for his age kid. And he asked me a few weeks ago if I was famous. So one of his teachers or somebody had told him that I was well known. And it's so funny how when we're put in a situation where we're off guard and we respond from the heart, kind of authentically respond, how sincere the answer is. Because I spend most of my life, right? Yes, like posting and sharing and blogging and all of this stuff. But when my own kid, my own little boy, looks at me and says, like, are you famous, Dad? And I'm able to respond and say, no, gosh, no, absolutely not. I don't even aspire to be. I just serve people. And there's not very many people out there anymore that do that and like do that with joy. And so I get to make a lot of people happy. And that's not a bad thing to be known for.
Right.
So I guess the purpose, like the reason I wanted to have you on here was to speak to those people, like the people that feel as though they're 40 hours deep in their YouTube education, trying to figure out new OCF concepts, or, you know, they're frustrated because they can't afford the new camera or the new lens or whatever. And then here you are. Yes, don't get me wrong. You're shooting the most remarkably composed and artistic photos, but you're doing it for a different purpose than for perfect. And that's really special.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so let's lighten it. Let's soften it for a hot freaking minute before I cry. I'm not going there. My parents listen to every single episode. I do want to talk a little bit about how then you got kind of recognized in the photo community. You know, not by your clients and not by magazines and all of the stuff for your work. But you jumped in head first into the Fujifilm kind of community. What is the gear that you're shooting? Like, and why the heck did you pick? Out of nowhere, why did you pick that? I'm guys, this episode is not sponsored by Fujifilm. I think it's special to hear about it. So tell me about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, so my whole career, because the camera that my dad handed me was a Canon. So I had just, you start into a system and it's just sort of expensive to change and you just sort of keep building and keep going. So I just shot Canon my whole life. And then I was getting really tired of picking it up. Like it was just super heavy and like all of these things. And I had a medium format when I was shooting film and had then sold it, but like I had it and I loved it. And I always was like, oh man, I really want a medium format digital. And then I started to hear about the Fujifilm GFX 50S that was coming out. So I was like, and Fujifilm is so good at putting stuff out prior to things being sold. So I was like watching all the videos and I was reading all the things. I was like, I'm going to go for it. So I like purchased that camera and two of the lenses at the time, which were the 63 and the 120. And I got it right before I left for a wedding in New Orleans. And I was like, oh, I'm going to just use it, right? Like I'm going to do all the things that you should never do, which is use new gear.
Yeah, that's bad advice.
Yeah, very bad advice. Don't listen to anything I say. But that's what I did. And it was funny because like, obviously a Fujifilm camera is set up differently than a Canon camera, but it just felt so easy to use. Like it just was like set up perfectly for me. And I loved it. I had like I still had my Canon camera on me and I used the GFX for my other shoulder. And I was picking that up more than I was doing anything else. And it was a complicated day. It was like in this like dark venue. And then we were running around at night. They did the parade down the street in New Orleans. I forget what they call that. But they had the band. It was very fun. And when I brought the images home and I looked at them, and like a lot of the times I would like shoot something with the 63 on the Fujifilm and then shoot it with the 50 on my Canon, and I would compare. And I loved the colors. I loved the look of the GFX. And so I was just in, and it was kind of a huge deal for me I consider myself a very loyal person. So to switch teams, not that I was ever like, but to switch brands was like a big deal for me. So I wrote them an email. My husband was like, you should just tell them how much you love it, because he also knows how loyal I am. So he was like, here's an email. Just send them like a little love note. And I didn't want anything from it. I was just like, guys, I bought your camera. I love it. Thank you so much for making one for me. It's perfect. And that sort of started a relationship there, which has been one of the most amazing and wonderful things in my life, because I feel like as if you're a wedding photographer, like a solo, like I work with my husband, but like if you don't have a crowd of other photographers that work under you, we're very independent people. I'll be working later with my laptop, watching Gilmore Girls, and like just by myself editing, right? Like, so to be able to have a collective and to have met you, to have met Paul and like all of those people, Derek, like it's just so great to be able to have a connection with artists that I would never have met otherwise. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, it did. And but it sort of spurred exactly what I wanted to then point out. Anybody that hasn't shot that camera before, I'm just going to give you the high level on it. The original GFX 50S is probably a quarter of the speed, the shooting speed, the actual like process. It probably slows you down to 25% of what Alison was used to out of, I don't even know what Canon it was. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. It was someone you had, the one.
The 1DX2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It probably, so maybe even less than that, if I'm honest. But let's call it 25%. The reason I ask that is because I don't know if you do this or not. I know a lot of people do now. I every year I kind of have a word. Do you do that? January 1st, I always kind of pick a word.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I've been doing that for years, and it's funny to go back in my life now and be like, oh yeah, 2018 was like my word was health, and that was when I started running and I started like kind of getting healthy. Like, oh, cool. Okay, I love that. And then like, sorry, that was 2019, and then 2020, my year was purpose, and I like spent the whole year trying to re-envision like what the heck am I doing as a dad, as a husband, as a friend, as a professional. But then this whole year for me has been about intentionality, about like diving in, this podcast being an expression of that. But one of the things I'm most attracted to your photography about, and really just you as a person, is that you chose to pick up this camera that forced you to slow down. Where the most of the industry right now is about bigger, faster, stronger. You've heard about that. What's that new camera that just came out that's like 120 frames per second or something? Come on. Ugh. Anyway, sorry. I shouldn't be that opinionated, but I am. But you chose. You like picked up a camera that forced you to slow down. And I think there's something really valuable there. I think that's what the industry probably needs more of, is somebody saying like, hey, stop speeding up. Like, just be more present. Make sure that when you press the button, it actually matters that you pressed the button, instead of press the button and hold it down for 5 seconds and just assume that somewhere in there is the frame, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so you switched over to the full GFX set, and the reason that's pivotal for me is because I had switched to the GFX system basically right after we met. Right, I just got the 50R like right after we met, and so now you are shooting. What are you shooting now?
So I had the GFX 100S and the XT4 is usually like what's on my shoulders. I was doing 3 cameras at a time, and then I was like, what am I like? Why am I doing that?
So I was doing the same thing.
Yeah, but I think it was you because I think you posted a picture of yourself working, and I was like, wait, you have 1 camera? And you're like, yeah, sometimes it's good to slow down. And I was like, yes, Alison, sometimes it's good to slow down. Yes. So it was like a good, so, and I pretty much have that 80 on my GFX 95% of the time.
See, I love that, and it shows in your work. It's really funny because I shoot the 63 almost all the time.
Yeah.
It's just that camera has just changed everything for me. Okay, well, so I know this wasn't supposed to be like super gear heavy and nerdy, but the reason I brought it up is because I think it's so valuable to point out that somebody that is as intentional as you are, as present as you are, not only are you not following trend with the way your photography looks or the way your photography business is run, you're also not following suit with the gear that you shoot. Everything has intention. So, okay, then wrap us up a little bit. Like, we're 45 minutes into this. I've had tears in my eyes twice, as have you. if you could like sit down, and this is the type of thing I could actually see you doing. If you could sit down one-on-one with any or every photographer that's 2 years into their career, they've decided that they want to take photos, but they don't know why or what they're doing or where it's going. What would be your very first piece of advice?
I've been doing this obviously for 2 decades. I think the most important thing is like figuring out the why. Because if it is because you want to be popular on Instagram or you want to make cute little videos on TikTok, that's not going to last forever. There's going to be something else, who knows when. Like that's not going to hold. If it's because you find it important to document your day and if there's a reason, like you have a reason, like I think that's the most important. Like if I was in this because I wanted to make money or that I wanted to simply, be Insta famous, like I wouldn't still be doing this. If that makes sense, you know what I mean? Just because that's not I don't think that's a good longevity. That's not like a plan that's going to last. So I think it's truly figuring out your why. Is it because you grew up in a place where you moved around a lot and like you wanted to have something that grounded you? Okay, then that could be your reason why. Is it, because you lost someone? Is it because you've had health crisis and you like to photograph things because you want to be able to tell stories? Then that can be your why. I just think there has to be a bigger reason. And I think that's with anything in our lives. If it's just like, if it's such a superficial kind of like, this is what I'm into it, I don't think that's really, I can't imagine doing anything else with my life. Because this means so much to me. And sometimes I fear that like, it's like one of those things where I fear that like people won't get it when I send their gallery, like, oh, like what if they don't like get it quite yet, but then like it circles a couple years down the road. I usually get emails like, man, thanks so much. Because all of these things have changed in my life. And I can't tell you what it means to me that I have this picture. Right. Does that make any sense? I feel like I just kind of like jumbled out words.
No, I think it actually perfectly makes sense. I think essentially what you're saying is that like it's okay. Not only is it okay, it's great. It's powerful to decide that you want to be an artist for the art.
Right.
Like that you want to give for the giving. And I think there's an entire generation right now in our industry, an absolutely probably the dominant generation in our industry that are fast tracking to success and not realizing that there isn't a 401k to this business. There isn't you don't get to make your millions and check out in 2 years. It doesn't matter who you are. Like that, it just doesn't work that way. That longevity and volume is the only way that you survive. And if you don't know why you're doing it in the first place, are you going to be able to keep enough focus, which is an ironic way to put it, but enough focus on the value of who you are and what your time is worth to where you get to survive?
Right.
I don't know. To me, that's a really cool thing. It's funny. I think I have spoken with nearly every close friend, which you're absolutely in that group, but I think I've spoken to every close friend about the business stuff and the financial stuff and how do you market and what's your workflow, what's your funnel look like. I think you're probably the only person that I've never asked, and the reason for that is because it doesn't. You ground me. It doesn't matter. You've been doing this for 20 years and you're killing it. You're absolutely killing it. And yet, you're probably more focused on your purpose now than maybe ever. Okay. So what comes next for you? I mean, how does a person that has invested, half their life in this industry and is more passionate about it now than they've ever been, how do you project the next 10 years of your life?
That's a great question. That's a really good question. And I still ask myself that because I'm still trying to figure that out. I don't know if you've ever had periods of your life where you're like, I'm not sure what the next space is, but I mean, it's still doing this. Like, I love that. I can't imagine a life not shooting weddings. I also love writing. So I've been writing a lot. Yeah, and that's the only answer I have. And like sometimes that's okay. Like sometimes it's okay to like to know it for my own self. Like I'm sort of juggling my dad, I'm juggling my son, I'm juggling having a senior in high school. Like I don't need to know my life for the next 10 years. I just need to be present in sort of the chaos that's happening around me at this moment. Like let me love up my kids because they're suddenly adults. And let me figure out my dad because it's the end of his life. And let's just worry about that because like I get super caught up in like, oh, what should I be like, what is it? I'm like, that's going to happen, whatever's going to happen. I cannot control that. So what I do know is that I've got some major players in my life that just need some extra attention and love. So that's what I'm doing, but my future will never not include a camera. So
Boy. I'm gonna kind of finish us off by telling this story. Last March, April, the pandemic hit, and like really hit, right? I don't think any of us will ever forget those first few weeks of it being like, okay, well, it's not looming, it's here. And even though you and I are 2,000 miles apart, it didn't matter. It sunk in the same week for everybody. And my mind, because of any level of insecurity, but also just the way that I sort of distract myself from anxiety, my mind immediately went to like, okay, weddings are being canceled right and left. Shoots are being rescheduled, but it's not like bills aren't going to be due. So how am I going to pivot? That's the word of the year everybody wanted, right? But how am I going to pivot and roll and change? Every time there is an uncertainty in the world like this, it's a brand new evolution of leadership. Like new people rise to the top, and how do I become that? And I found myself filling myself up with any number of ways that I could avoid the actual fear that was inside my head as to like my wife, my kids, my home, my town, my country, my friends. And I remember having a conversation with you, and it's funny. I wonder if you remember this, but we were on a call with the entire Fujifilm team, the whole team. It was all of us, right? And I was kind of the new guy, and so everybody was always unmuting me and like razzing on me, and something got said about all the things that were going on. I was trying to impress everybody with how many ways that I had decided I was going to beat this pandemic. And then it clicked over to you, and you kind of sat back in your chair with this sort of wise smile that you sort of always have when you look at me. And you said, just be kind to yourself. And Alison, that hit me in the face. Oh my gosh. Because, the one thing that I'm bad at, but I think that's universal these days. I think the one thing that artists are bad at, listeners, I would go as bold as to say I think one of the things that you are bad at is just giving yourself any kind of grace. And having somebody that I appreciate and love and just look up to as much as you, Alison, look at me and say like, hey, just slow your roll. Be kind to yourself for a hot minute. Let it sink in that all the nerves and all the anxiety and all the problems are real, but they're temporary. And then when you're ready to get back to work, get back to work. And I did, and it was a really important moment in my life, and it changed actually, I think, the way that you and I communicate a lot as well. So all that said, I'm just really grateful for your time on here. I'm grateful for the way that you've influenced our community, our network, our group of friends, but now, more people through this silly little podcast and the 4 people that listen. 2 of which are my parents. I already mentioned that. So,
thank you so much for having me on. It's the best podcast I've ever done, and I'm not just saying that.
Oh, here I am flattered. If you're on YouTube, I'm blushing. Both of you over on YouTube. Okay, so let's wrap it off smiling, because let's be honest, we both need a glass of wine at this point. and it's 10 in the morning. Um, where are some ways that we can engage with you? Like, where are some things you've got some new stuff going on too? So, where are some ways that we can kind of get to know you better and hear your voice and interact?
So Instagram is probably what I'm on most, which is just at AlisonConklin.com or Alison Conklin. And
Link in the show notes.
Oh yeah, there you go. And my website, of course, which is AlisonConklin.com. But I've been writing for Food You Love, which I love. Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at right now.
That's a really cool thing. That's kind of what I was talking about. I think it's really neat, and it's actually showing the curation over there. It looks really good. You just have such a clean eye with the way things flow. It's funny you mentioned earlier in the show that you feel like you don't really have a style, and yet I 100% promise I could pick out one of your images from a lineup any given day. So,
well, thanks.
So okay, guys. Well, hey, if you've made it 55 minutes into this podcast. Y'all, thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for investing your time and your energy into this chat. And I would encourage you to learn, to soak up something from this, to be kind to yourself, to do some things with intentionality, to create from a place of purpose, and to stop comparing yourself to other people that feel like maybe they've figured out something that you haven't yet. So I think Alison is absolutely just a testament to what intentionality looks like in an artist. And so Alison, I'm so grateful that you were on here with me. It means a lot.
Oh, thanks for asking me, Miles.
Yes, another one soon. Okay, gosh,
All right.
What would we talk about? All right.